The last box was loaded into the moving truck, and Catherine Palmer stood alone in the empty Chicago apartment that had been her home for 15 years. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the bare windows. She ran her fingers along the kitchen counter where family photos once stood, evidence of a life that no longer existed. At 43, Catherine hadn't planned on starting over. The divorce papers, finalized just 3 months ago, were tucked inside her purse like a wound that wouldn't heal. David had left her for someone younger, someone without the responsibilities of motherhood and mortgage payments. "I need a fresh start," he'd said, as if their 17 years together had been nothing but a false beginning. Catherine picked up the last remaining item in the apartment, a silver-framed photograph of her parents. Their smiling faces, frozen in time before the car accident 8 months ago, seemed to ask, "What now, Katie?" Her mother had always called her that. Even after Catherine had built her successful PR career, even after she'd become a mother herself. "I don't know," she whispered to the empty room, her voice echoing against bare walls. "I really don't know anymore." Downstairs, 9-year-old Lily waited in their packed SUV, her small face pressed against the window, eyes following the Chicago skyline as if memorizing it one last time. Catherine slid into the driver's seat, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ready for our adventure, sweetie?" Lily clutched her worn stuffed rabbit closer. "Do they have internet in small towns?" "Mom?" Catherine laughed, her first genuine laugh in weeks. "Yes, honey, they have internet, and hopefully something else we both need." "What's that?" Lily asked, looking up with curious eyes that reminded Catherine so much of her own mother. "Peace," Catherine said, starting the engine. "Maybe even a fresh start." Sometimes life pushes us toward unexpected crossroads. Where are you listening to this story from? Leave a comment and subscribe if you'd like to accompany Catherine on her journey to rediscover herself. The email had come from her college roommate, Elaine, who had escaped city life years ago for a small Georgia town. "Just saw this and thought of you," the message read. "Crazy, I know, but sometimes crazy is exactly what we need." The listing showed a fire-damaged Victorian mansion selling for just $500 in the small town of Oakwood, Georgia. Property taxes paid, no mortgage, just a commitment to restore what remained. The price wasn't what caught Catherine's attention, though. It was the photograph, a grand oak staircase still standing proudly amid the rubble, defying the flames that had claimed everything around it. Something about that staircase, its resilience, its dignity despite the destruction, resonated with something deep inside her. "A ghost house!" Lily had exclaimed when Catherine had cautiously mentioned the idea over dinner at their extended stay hotel. "Like in the movies." "It's a fixer-upper," Catherine had corrected, surprised by her daughter's enthusiasm. "A very big project." But as Catherine scrolled through the images again that night, she felt a strange familiarity with the charred walls and broken windows, as if she'd walked those halls before. She closed her eyes, remembering her grandmother's stories of an old Southern house where secrets whispered through the walls and history lingered in every corner. As a child, Catherine had been mesmerized by those tales, drawing pictures of grand mansions with sweeping staircases, just like the one in the photograph. Was it a sign? Catherine didn't believe in signs. She believed in spreadsheets, PR strategies, and 5-year plans. All the things that had failed to prevent her life from unraveling. Sometimes, her mother had told her once, the heart recognizes home before the mind understands why. 2 weeks later, Catherine turned their SUV onto the main street of Oakwood, Georgia, a town where ancient oak trees lined the sidewalks and time seemed to move more slowly. Lily pressed her face against the window, taking in the quaint storefronts, the white steepled church, and the town square where elderly men played chess under the shade of a sprawling magnolia. "It looks like a movie set," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. Catherine felt it too, a peculiar sense of stepping into a different era, a different pace of life. As they parked in front of a cafe called Southern Comfort, heads turned, conversations paused, eyes followed them as they walked inside. "You must be the city folks who bought Bellwood Manor," said the gray-haired waitress, her southern accent thick as honey as she poured them each a glass of sweet tea without asking. "Word travels fast round here." Catherine nodded, suddenly aware of the whispers around them. "We're just staying at the Pine Creek Inn until we figure out if the house is salvageable." "Salvageable," an older man at the counter repeated with a humorless chuckle. "That's one word for it." The cafe had grown oddly quiet, the only sound coming from the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead. Catherine felt a chill despite the warm Georgia afternoon. But then a woman in her 70s emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour-covered hands on a well-worn apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, her face lined with wrinkles that spoke of laughter more than hardship. "Martha Jenkins," she said, extending a hand to Catherine, "owner of this establishment and the only person in town with enough sense not to believe in ghost stories." She turned her warm gaze to Lily. "And you must be the little lady who's going to bring some youth back to this old town." Lily smiled shyly. "Do you know about our house?" "Your house," Martha emphasized with a smile. "I like the sound of that. And yes, I know that place better than most." She glanced around the cafe, then lowered her voice. "Why don't you all come back tomorrow morning before the breakfast rush? I'll tell you what I know about Bellwood Manor. The truth, not the nonsense these folks have been spreading." As they left the cafe, Catherine noticed a young boy about Lily's age waving from behind the counter. "That's my great-grandson, Max," Martha called after them. "He'll be around all summer. Perhaps you two can be friends." Lily's face lit up at the prospect, and Catherine felt a small knot of tension release. Perhaps coming here wasn't such a mistake after all. Bellwood Manor stood at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, its burned facade looming against the twilight sky like a wounded sentinel. Catherine parked the SUV at the edge of what had once been a circular driveway, now cracked and sprouting weeds. "It's bigger than in the pictures," Lily whispered, clutching her mother's hand as they approached. Catherine nodded, her flashlight beam cutting through the gathering darkness. The mansion had once been magnificent, 3 stories of southern grandeur with columns and wraparound porches. Now it stood partially collapsed, blackened by smoke, its windows gaping like hollow eyes. "Stay close," Catherine cautioned as they stepped through the front door, which hung precariously from a single hinge. The air inside was thick with the lingering scent of ash and dampness. Their footsteps echoed across the marble entryway that had somehow survived the blaze. Catherine's flashlight revealed peeling wallpaper, a chandelier that had crashed to the floor, and doorways leading to rooms filled with charred furniture. And then, there it was, the staircase from the photograph. Solid oak, hand-carved balusters, rising majestically from the foyer, as if the fire had respectfully stopped at its edges. Catherine approached it slowly, running her fingers along the smooth wood that had defied destruction. "It's like it was waiting for us," she murmured. A sudden draft stirred the air, cool against her skin despite the summer evening. Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that the house was exhaling, acknowledging their presence after years of abandonment. "Mom!" Lily called from a corner of the room. "Look what I found!" Catherine turned to see her daughter holding a porcelain doll, its Victorian-style dress gray with soot but otherwise intact. The doll's painted face, though smudged, had a serene expression, its glass eyes catching the flashlight beam with an almost lifelike gleam. "Can I keep it? Please," Lily pleaded, already brushing dust from the doll's china cheeks. She was waiting for someone to find her. Catherine hesitated, her practical side wanting to refuse. But something about the way Lily cradled the doll, the first genuine excitement she'd seen in her daughter's eyes since the divorce, made her nod. "You can take it back to the inn, but we'll need to clean it thoroughly first." As they carefully cleaned the porcelain face that evening, Lily discovered tiny faded letters painted on the doll's neck. "Look, Mom! Her name is Annabelle!" Lily exclaimed, tracing the delicate script with her finger. "She's been waiting for us for so long." That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep with the clean doll beside her pillow, Catherine dreamed of Bellwood Manor. In her dream, she stood at the top of the grand staircase while a man in old-fashioned clothing looked out a window, his back to her. When he turned, his face was lined with unspeakable sadness. "You found her," he seemed to say, though his lips didn't move. "Now find the others." Catherine woke with a start, the man's sorrow lingering like a physical presence in the dark motel room. The Bennetts owned Bellwood Manor for over a century, Martha explained the next morning, refilling Catherine's coffee cup. The cafe was empty except for Max, who was showing Lily how to play checkers in the corner booth. Samuel and Eleanor were the last of the line to live there. Martha's eyes grew distant as she settled into the chair across from Catherine. They were a private couple but kind. Eleanor taught piano to half the children in town. Samuel managed the family's remaining investments. Timber mostly by then. "What happened to them?" Catherine asked, warming her hands around the coffee mug. Martha's voice dropped lower. "Eleanor passed from cancer about 10 years ago. Ovarian, didn't catch it till it was too late." She sighed heavily. "Samuel was never the same after. Stopped coming to town, events, church, everything. The curtains stayed drawn. Then one winter night, 8 years ago, the fire came." "And Samuel?" Martha's hands trembled slightly. "That's the mystery that's kept this town gossiping all these years. He vanished. No body found in the ruins, no hospital records, no funeral arrangements. It was as if he'd simply disappeared." "The police investigation?" "Ruled it arson," Martha said bluntly. "But whether Samuel was the arsonist or the victim, nobody could say for certain. Some folks think he couldn't bear living without Eleanor and—" She glanced toward the children, leaving the implication unspoken. "But you don't believe that," Catherine said, recognizing the skepticism in the older woman's eyes. "Samuel wasn't the type for dramatic gestures," Martha confirmed. "He was rational, methodical, even in his grief. And there's something else." She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He once told me, 'Some secrets should remain buried, Martha, for everyone's sake.'" Catherine felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm cafe. "What secrets?" Martha shook her head. "That's what you bought yourself for $500, dear. Not just a house, but all the ghosts of its past." 3 days later, Catherine sat at the small desk in their inn room, staring at an envelope that had arrived with no return address, postmarked from Burlington, Vermont. Inside was a brief letter on simple stationery. "Ms. Palmer, you don't know me, but I was Samuel Bennett's hospice nurse during his final days in Vermont. He spoke often of Bellwood and the daughter few knew existed. He never intended to abandon the house, only the pain it contained. I believe he would want you to have this photograph. Perhaps it will help you understand why he did what he did. With respect, Margaret Winters." With trembling fingers, Catherine removed a faded photograph from the envelope. It showed a much younger Samuel Bennett cradling a newborn infant, his face transformed by a joy that contradicted Martha's description of the reclusive widower. On the back, written in elegant script, "For Rebecca, the light in my darkness." Catherine stared at the image for a long time, feeling as if she'd been entrusted with something precious and dangerous all at once. A child no one in town had mentioned, a secret Samuel had taken to his grave. Or had he? She carefully tucked the photo into her journal, suddenly certain that restoring Bellwood Manor was no longer just about giving herself and Lily a fresh start. It was about uncovering a truth that had been buried in ashes and silence. "Who are you, Rebecca?" she whispered to the empty room. "And what happened to you?" Catherine was measuring the dimensions of the front porch when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A sleek black BMW pulled up, looking absurdly out of place against the rural backdrop. The man who emerged wore an expensive suit despite the Georgia heat, his face set in lines of disapproval as he surveyed the mansion. "You must be Mrs. Palmer," he said without offering his hand. "James Bennett. Samuel Bennett was my great-uncle." Catherine straightened, brushing dust from her jeans. I didn't realize there were any Bennett still connected to the property. The town clerk said taxes had been paid through a trust, but no heirs had claimed. There are legal complications, James interrupted, his gaze coldly assessing. My family has been waiting for the right time to reclaim this land. We were expecting the county to foreclose eventually so we could purchase it at auction. Instead, I bought it for $500, Catherine finished, understanding dawning. You're not here to welcome me to town, are you? James's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let me be direct, Ms. Palmer. This property has been in my family for generations. You're an outsider who has no understanding of its complicated history. Our family foundation was prepared to offer a substantial sum to the county. We can make you a similar offer. I'm not interested in selling, Catherine replied, surprised by the firmness in her voice. James's expression hardened. You're digging into things best left buried, Ms. Palmer. This house has already destroyed one branch of my family. I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. Are you threatening me, Mr. Bennett? Merely offering friendly advice. He turned to leave, then paused. By the way, I understand you've been asking around town about Bellwood's history, about Samuel. His voice took on an edge. Some stones are better left unturned. As James's car disappeared down the driveway, Catherine noticed Lily watching from the broken front window, the porcelain doll clutched to her chest. I don't like him, Mommy, Lily said when Catherine came inside. He feels wrong. Catherine pulled her daughter into a hug. It's okay, sweetie. He's just unhappy we bought the house before he could. Lily looked up with solemn eyes. Annabelle says he's not allowed here. It's not his house anymore. Catherine glanced at the doll in Lily's arms. Annabelle told you that, did she? Lily nodded with complete conviction. She knows things about this house. She's been here a long time. Catherine tried to laugh it off, but something about the way Lily cradled the doll made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Later that night, after tucking Lily into bed, Catherine could have sworn she heard her daughter whispering, as if carrying on a conversation with someone unseen. Bellwood's secrets are slowly being revealed. Do you think Catherine should continue her exploration or heed James's warning? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Catherine couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious child in the photograph. If Samuel and Eleanor Bennett had a daughter, why did no one in town seem to know about her? And why would Samuel hide his own child? The next day, Catherine returned to Bellwood alone, while Lily spent the morning with Max and Martha at the cafe. She was drawn to the second floor, to the one room that Martha had mentioned remained strangely untouched by the fire, the nursery at the end of the hall. The blue paint on the walls had faded, but remained largely intact, unlike the scorched wallpaper in the rest of the house. A rocking chair sat in the corner, and the outline of what must have once been a crib could be seen in the dust on the floor. Unlike the rest of the mansion, this room felt protected, preserved. Catherine ran her fingers along the walls, feeling for anything unusual. Near the floorboards, she noticed a section that sounded hollow when tapped. Kneeling, she found a loose panel and carefully pried it away. Inside the small cavity was a wooden box wrapped in what appeared to be a baby blanket, yellowed with age but embroidered with the initials R.B. in faded blue thread. Catherine's heart pounded as she carefully unwrapped it, feeling like an intruder in someone else's sacred memories. The box itself was crafted of cherry wood, its brass hinges tarnished but intact. Inside, she found several letters tied with a faded yellow ribbon, a silver rattle engraved with the initials R.B., and a small leather-bound journal with a peculiar lock. Catherine's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. The paper was fragile, the ink faded but still legible. My dearest Rebecca, if you are reading this, it means the house has found someone brave enough to listen. I'm sorry for hiding you. I'm sorry the world never knew you existed, but I couldn't protect you both. Your mother was gone, and the grief nearly destroyed me. But your smile, it kept me breathing. I left you in safe hands, the only ones I trusted. But if you ever return, if you ever seek your truth, this is where your story begins. With eternal love, your father. Catherine sat back on her heels, overwhelmed by the raw emotion in those words. Samuel Bennett had hidden his daughter, but why? What could possibly have driven a father to erase all evidence of his child's existence? She gathered the box and its contents and drove straight to the cafe. Martha was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, and her hands stilled when Catherine placed the silver rattle on the counter. "Where did you find this?" Martha whispered, her fingers hovering over the engraved initials without touching them. "In a hidden compartment in the nursery," Catherine answered. "Martha, who is Rebecca Bennett?" The older woman sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 70 years. "Sit down, dear. This is a long story and not a happy one." Martha explained how Samuel had changed after Eleanor's death, not just with grief, but with a growing paranoia. He became convinced someone was watching the house, monitoring his movements. He installed new locks, drew the curtains tight. Who was he afraid of? He never said exactly, just kept muttering about family obligations and old debts. Martha shook her head. "When Rebecca was born, and I only know this because I delivered groceries and saw the baby once, Samuel refused to register her birth. No birth certificate, no announcement in the paper, nothing. He said it was the only way to keep her safe." "Safe from what?" "That's the question that's haunted me for years," Martha admitted. "Then one day, about a year before the fire, I came with supplies, and Rebecca was gone. Samuel said only that she'd been taken somewhere safe, that it was better this way." He was hollow after that, as if his heart had gone with her. Catherine thought of the photograph, of the joy on Samuel's face as he held his infant daughter. And no one else in town knew? Samuel and Eleanor kept to themselves after Eleanor's diagnosis. They'd been trying for a child for years without success. Most folks assumed they'd given up. Martha studied Catherine's face carefully. "Why are you so interested in this old tragedy, dear?" Catherine hesitated, then pulled out the photograph from her purse. "Because I think Rebecca might still be alive, and I think she deserves to know her father never abandoned her, not in his heart." The lock on the journal proved challenging. Catherine tried various small keys she found in the house without success. Finally, she remembered David, the owner of the antique shop in town, had mentioned he was once a locksmith. The bell above the shop door jingled as Catherine entered the cluttered space filled with vintage furniture, old books, and glass display cases of jewelry and small collectibles. David, a man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from the brass lamp he was polishing. "Ms. Palmer, how's the restoration coming along?" Catherine placed the journal on the counter. "Actually, I need your expertise with this lock." David examined it with professional interest, turning the small book in his hands. "This is quite old. Late 1800s style, but modified. See this?" He pointed to an unusual mechanism. "Custom work. This wasn't meant to be opened by just anyone." He rummaged beneath the counter and emerged with a set of slender tools. "This is a family heirloom, I take it?" "Something like that," Catherine hedged. "Found it in the house." David's hand stilled. "From Bellwood?" His voice had changed, grown more somber. "My grandfather was the locksmith in town back when the Bennetts were in their prime. Made all their locks. He did." Catherine watched as he delicately worked the mechanism, his expression concentrated. With a soft click, the lock finally yielded. "There we are." He handed the journal back without opening it. "Some things are meant to stay private until the right person comes along." He hesitated, then added, "My grandfather used to say the Bennetts carried burdens heavier than most. Whatever you find in there, try to remember we're all products of our time, for better or worse." Catherine thanked him and hurried back to the inn, curiosity burning within her. Once alone in her room, she opened the journal with reverent care. The first entry was dated March the 9th, 1982. "Rebecca arrived today. I didn't know I could still feel joy. Her eyes are Eleanor's, her tiny hands perfect. She gives me reason to breathe again. but I must protect her from my name, from the past, from what I inherited. As Catherine turned the pages, a story unfolded of a man torn between love for his daughter and fear of a shadowy past. Samuel wrote about a sealed family vault somewhere on the property containing documents his father had instructed him to destroy, evidence of deals made in blood and fortunes built on broken backs. The final entry, dated just weeks before the fire, chilled Catherine to the bone. They will come for it someday. The truth I couldn't bring myself to destroy. But they won't find it if the house burns first. Rebecca is safe. That's all that matters now. May whoever finds this understand. Some sins can never be washed clean, but innocence deserves protection at any cost. Catherine closed the journal, her mind racing. Samuel had set the fire deliberately, not out of madness or grief, but as a desperate attempt to protect his daughter and bury a history so dark he believed it better burned than revealed. But what secrets could be so terrible? And where was this vault Samuel mentioned? When Lily returned from her day with Martha and Max, Catherine was surprised to find her daughter unusually quiet, clutching Annabelle the doll with an intensity that seemed odd. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, brushing Lily's hair back from her forehead. "Annabelle showed me a tree today," Lily said, her voice small. "In my dream, a big old tree where treasures are buried." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. "What kind of tree, Lily?" "An oak tree, with a rose carved on a stone underneath. She says that's where the sad man put his secrets." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Catherine sat by the window of their inn room, the journal open in her lap. Outside, stars peppered the Georgia sky, so much brighter than they'd ever appeared in Chicago. She thought of Samuel Bennett, of the weight he'd carried, of the daughter he'd sent away to protect. She thought of her own daughter sleeping peacefully despite the upheaval of the past year. What wouldn't she do to protect Lily, to shield her from pain? "I understand," she whispered to the ghost of Samuel Bennett. "I understand why you did it." That night, Catherine dreamed she stood beneath a massive oak tree, its branches spreading like protective arms above her. A man's voice whispered, "Dig, find me." She woke with the first light of dawn, certain of what she needed to do next. The overgrown gardens behind Bellwood Manor had once been magnificent, judging by the remnants of stone pathways and the skeletons of formal hedges now grown wild. Catherine moved methodically through the tangled vegetation, looking for the oldest oak tree on the property. She found it at the far edge of the garden, a massive oak that must have been centuries old, its trunk so wide it would take 3 people to encircle it. At its base, partially covered by moss and soil, was a flat stone. Catherine knelt and brushed away decades of accumulated debris to reveal a faint carving, a compass rose pointing north. Her heart pounding, she returned to her car for a shovel. The soil was hard, compacted by years of neglect, but Catherine dug with determination, uncovering a stone slab with an iron ring embedded in its center. With straining muscles, she managed to lift it, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. The air that rose from the opening was cool and musty, smelling of old paper and secrets long kept. Catherine switched on her flashlight and carefully made her way down the stone steps, cobwebs brushing against her face. The chamber below was surprisingly dry and well preserved, a small room lined with wooden shelves holding leather-bound ledgers, stacks of correspondence, and metal boxes. A heavy oak table stood in the center, and upon it a large trunk with a simple note taped to its lid. "For Rebecca, when the truth no longer needs to hide." For hours, Catherine pored over the documents, the truth of the Bennett family legacy gradually taking shape before her horrified eyes. Ledgers from the 1860s showed the family had amassed its fortune through cotton plantations worked by enslaved people. Correspondence from the 1920s revealed how Bennett coal mines had covered up multiple deadly accidents. Most damning were the records from 1924 documenting the family's involvement in violently suppressing labor organizers, resulting in the deaths of 12 workers whose names had been systematically erased from local records. Samuel's own notes showed his discovery of these atrocities and his anguished attempts to make anonymous restitution to the descendants of those wronged. Payments made through shell companies and trusts, never traceable back to the Bennett name. Catherine sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of what she discovered. This wasn't just one man's shame. It was generations of power and privilege built on exploitation and violence, carefully concealed behind the veneer of Southern gentility. And somewhere out there was Rebecca Bennett, a woman who had never known her father's full truth, never understood why he'd sent her away, never claimed her rightful heritage, however tainted it might be. As Catherine climbed back to the surface, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded her. When her vision cleared, she found herself staring at James Bennett, his face twisted with rage. "Breaking and entering now, Miss Palmer?" he said coldly. "I could have you arrested." Catherine straightened, clutching the journal to her chest. "This is my property, Mr. Bennett, and I think I understand now why you're so desperate to get it back." James's eyes darted to the open vault entrance, and a flash of genuine fear crossed his face. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." "I know exactly what I'm meddling with," Catherine retorted. "Your family's secrets, the truth Samuel tried to protect his daughter from." "Rebecca," James spat the name like a curse, "the mistake that should never have happened. Do you have any idea what's at stake here? The Bennett Foundation funds hospitals, schools, scholarships. All of that could be destroyed if certain historical oversights were to become public. You mean if people learn that your family fortune was built on exploitation and murder?" Catherine challenged. James stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You have a daughter, don't you, Miss Palmer? It would be a shame if this peaceful town suddenly felt unwelcoming to you both." Catherine felt cold fear grip her heart, but she stood her ground. "Are you threatening a child, Mr. Bennett? How very in keeping with your family tradition." Something dangerous flashed in James's eyes, but he merely straightened his expensive jacket. "You'll be hearing from my attorneys. I suggest you start packing." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Ms. Palmer, accidents happen in old houses all the time. Electrical fires, structural collapses. Be careful." That night, Catherine returned to the inn to find their room had been searched. Drawers left slightly open, items moved from where she'd left them. Most disturbing of all, Annabelle the doll was missing, with only a scrap of her dress found in the trash can outside. Lily was inconsolable, crying herself to sleep in Catherine's arms. "She was trying to help us, Mommy," she sobbed. "Now she's gone." Catherine held her daughter close, rage and determination building inside her. James Bennett had crossed a line, and in doing so, had only strengthened her resolve to uncover the full truth. Not just for Rebecca, but for all those whose stories had been erased by power and privilege. Tomorrow she would take everything she'd found to someone who might help make sense of it all. The Oakwood Historical Society occupied a small Victorian house on Magnolia Street, its white clapboard exterior and wraparound porch giving it the appearance of a dollhouse version of Bellwood Manor. Catherine arrived early, the trunk of documents from the vault carefully loaded in her car. Helen Edwards, the town archivist, was a slender woman in her mid-70s with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as Catherine explained her discoveries, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "I always suspected the official history had gaps," Helen finally said, examining the silver rattle Catherine had brought. Her fingers traced the engraved initials with unusual tenderness. "But this changes everything we thought we knew about Samuel Bennett. I need to find Rebecca," Catherine explained. "She deserves to know the truth about her father, about why he sent her away." Helen's eyes widened. "Rebecca Bennett," she repeated softly. "May I see that photograph again?" Catherine handed over the picture of Samuel with the infant. Helen studied it for a long moment, then rose and disappeared into a back room. She returned with a town registry, its leather binding cracked with age. With careful fingers, she turned the yellowed pages, finally stopping at an entry. Here, she said, pointing to a handwritten addition at the bottom of a page. Rebecca Bennett, born May 1982, unregistered. Added posthumously by hospital records clerk. Posthumously? Catherine echoed, her heart sinking. But Samuel said he sent her somewhere safe. He did, Helen said, her voice taking on an unusual quality. And now I believe I know where. She closed the registry with careful hands. There's someone you need to meet. Half an hour later, Catherine found herself standing before a small flower shop on the outskirts of town. Bloom and Grow read the hand-painted sign above a display window filled with vibrant arrangements. The door chimed softly as Helen led her inside. The shop was a riot of color and fragrance. Roses, lilies, and wildflowers arranged in vintage containers. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The space felt alive, peaceful, a sanctuary of growing things. "Just a moment," called a woman's voice from the back room. "Be right with you." When she emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth, Catherine felt her breath catch. The woman was in her early 40s with auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face lightly freckled from the sun. But it was her eyes that made Catherine's heart race, the exact same shape and unusual amber color as those in Samuel Bennett's photographs. "Helen, what a nice surprise," the woman said warmly, then turned a questioning gaze toward Catherine. Helen's voice was gentle. "Rebecca, this is Catherine Palmer. She's purchased Bellwood Manor." The woman's smile faltered. "I go by Rachel now," she said, a slight edge to her voice. "Rachel Davis. And I'm afraid you've been misinformed. I have no connection to that place." Catherine slowly reached into her bag and withdrew the silver rattle. "I found this in a hidden compartment in the nursery," she said softly, "along with the letters your father wrote to you." Rachel's face drained of color. She reached for the counter to steady herself, her eyes fixed on the rattle as if it were a ghost materialized before her. "It's not possible," she whispered. "They told me my parents died when I was an infant, that I had no family." "You were raised by Margaret Winters," Catherine said gently, "in Vermont. She was your father's nurse at the end." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, tears already forming. "How did you know that?" "She wrote to me," Catherine explained. "Sent me a photograph of you and your father." Rachel extended a trembling hand toward the rattle, but stopped short of touching it. "May I?" When Catherine placed it in her palm, Rachel closed her fingers around it, a sob escaping her throat. "I've dreamed about this," she whispered, "a silver rattle. I always thought it was just a dream." Helen quietly excused herself, leaving the two women alone among the flowers. Rachel led Catherine to a small table in the corner, her legs seemingly unable to support her any longer. "All my life," Rachel said, her voice unsteady, "I've had these fragments. A large house with sunshine streaming through tall windows. A man's voice singing lullabies, the scent of pipe tobacco and old books." She looked up at Catherine, her eyes pleading. Was that real?" "Yes," Catherine said gently, placing Samuel's journal and the bundle of letters on the table. "It was all real. Your father loved you more than anything in the world, enough to give you up to keep you safe." For the next 2 hours, the two women sat among the flowers as Rachel absorbed the truth of her origins. She read her father's journal entries with tears streaming down her face, tracing his handwriting as if to connect physically with the man she couldn't remember. "But why?" she finally asked. "Why hide me? Why erase everything?" Catherine explained what she discovered in the vault. The dark history of the Bennett family, the fortune built on exploitation, the cover-ups and violence. "I think your father was trying to break the cycle," she concluded. "He couldn't change the past, but he could protect you from its shadow." Rachel listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "All these years," she finally said, "I thought I came from nothing, that no one had wanted me. She held up one of the letters. And all along, I was loved this much. Catherine felt tears prick her own eyes. Your father created a new life for you, one untainted by the Bennett legacy. It was his final act of love. And the fire? Rachel asked quietly. I believe he set it deliberately, Catherine admitted, to destroy the evidence, to make it easier for the world to forget the Bennett name, and to ensure no one would come looking for you. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this revelation. You said you purchased Bellwood. Why? What made you want that burned-out shell of a house? Catherine smiled sadly. I was running from my own pain. Divorce, losing my parents, trying to start over for my daughter's sake. She hesitated. But now I think maybe the house was waiting for someone to find your story, to bring the truth into the light. Rachel wiped away tears. I'd like to see it. The house. My house. Would that be possible? Of course, Catherine said, reaching across the table to squeeze Rachel's hand. It belongs to you as much as to me. When Catherine brought Lily to meet Rachel the next day, something unexpected happened. The moment Lily saw Rachel, she froze, her eyes widening. You smell like the house, Lily blurted out. Rachel looked startled, then laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to brighten the flower shop. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good, Lily decided after a moment's consideration. Like old wood and flowers. The two formed an immediate bond, with Lily asking endless questions about the flowers, while Rachel patiently explained each one's name and meaning. Catherine watched them together, something warm unfurling in her chest. For the first time since the divorce, Lily seemed truly animated, truly present. Later that afternoon, as they were preparing to visit Bellwood together, the shop door burst open. James Bennett stood there, his face contorted with fury when he saw Rachel. So it's true, he snarled. The rumors around town. Rebecca Bennett, back from the dead. Rachel straightened, something of her father's dignity evident in her posture. My name is Rachel Davis. And you must be James. My cousin, I suppose. We are not family, James spat. You were Samuel's mistake, his shame. Do you have any idea what you've done by coming back here? The questions you'll raise? The damage to our foundation's reputation? Catherine stepped between them. I think you should leave, Mr. Bennett. James ignored her, his gaze fixed on Rachel. You think you found some touching family reunion? Let me tell you what you've really found. Evidence that could destroy a century of philanthropic work. Is that what you want? To tear down schools and hospitals because of ancient history? Ancient history? Rachel repeated, her voice suddenly steel. Is that what you call exploitation and murder? James blanched. So she's shown you the vault. Lovely. He turned to Catherine. You realize I could bury you in litigation, make it impossible for you to ever finish restoring that monstrosity? Or, Catherine suggested calmly, we could all sit down like rational adults and discuss how to acknowledge the truth while preserving the good work your foundation does. Reconciliation instead of erasure. Isn't that what this town deserves? What the victims' families deserve? Something flickered in James's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership, Catherine said, between the Bennett Foundation, the Historical Society, and Bellwood Manor. A chance to tell the full story, the darkness and the light. You're insane, James scoffed, but there was less conviction in his voice. No, Rachel said, stepping forward. She's right. We can't change what our ancestors did, but we can acknowledge it. We can make amends in the open, not through anonymous donations and hushed secrets. James looked between the two women, calculation evident in his expression. I'll need to consult with the foundation board, he finally said, his tone clipped. Do that, Catherine nodded. And Mr. Bennett, the next time you send someone to search my room or threaten my daughter's belongings, Remember that I have copies of everything from the vault. Everything. After James left, Rachel turned to Catherine with wide eyes. Did he really threaten Lily? Catherine nodded grimly. Took her doll, the one she found at Bellwood. It meant a lot to her. Rachel's expression hardened. Then it's time to take back what's ours, starting with Bellwood itself. Secrets have been revealed, but can truth truly heal old wounds? Have you ever had to face a painful past to find peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. A week later, as Catherine and Rachel were reviewing restoration plans at Bellwood, a silver-haired woman in her 70s approached the property, clutching her purse like armor. She stood at the edge of the driveway, staring up at the mansion with an expression of profound grief. Can I help you? Catherine called, walking down from the porch. The woman startled. You must be Ms. Palmer. I'm Vivian Bennett, Samuel's sister-in-law. Her voice was cultured but fragile, like fine china ready to crack. Catherine felt her pulse quicken. Please come in, such as it is. Vivian followed hesitantly, her eyes taking in the charred walls and exposed beams. When she saw Rachel standing in what had once been the parlor, she froze. My God, she whispered, you look just like Eleanor. Rachel's hand trembled as she set down her notebook. You knew my mother? She was my sister, Vivian said simply. The three women sat amid the ruins of the once grand parlor, where Catherine had managed to salvage some furniture. Vivian reached into her purse and withdrew a yellowed envelope. I've kept this for 20 years, she said, placing it on the makeshift table between them. Samuel's last letter to me? I never showed it to anyone, not even when rumors started about Rebecca's existence. With Rachel's permission, Catherine opened the letter, its folds worn from frequent handling. Vivian, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't bear the weight any longer. I failed Eleanor. I failed you, and I fear I may have failed Rebecca too. But I know one thing. Truth matters, even if it burns. Please forgive me for what I'm about to do. It seems the only way to break the chain that has bound our family for generations. All my love, Samuel. Vivian wiped away a tear. I blamed him for everything, she confessed. For Eleanor's illness, for his secrecy, for the fire. I thought he'd destroyed Bellwood out of madness or guilt. She looked around at the partially restored walls. But seeing what you're doing here, honoring the truth while rebuilding, I realized Samuel wasn't trying to erase the past. He was trying to give Rebecca a chance at a future untainted by it. Why didn't you ever look for me? Rachel asked, her voice small. I thought you were a rumor, Vivian admitted, a town myth created to explain Samuel's strange behavior after the fire. It wasn't until I saw the notice about the restoration project in the paper with Catherine's name that I started to wonder if there might be more to the story. She reached across the table to touch Rachel's hand tentatively. I should have looked harder. I should have believed. Rachel's smile was gentle. We can't change the past, but we're here now. Vivian straightened, something of her aristocratic bearing returning. I want to help, she announced, with the restoration, with the truth-telling, whatever you need. Catherine exchanged a glance with Rachel. Actually, she said slowly, there is something you might help us with. We're thinking of establishing the Bellwood Heritage Project, a nonprofit dedicated to uncovering forgotten histories and preserving personal legacies. Including the difficult parts, Rachel added firmly. All of it deserves to be remembered. Vivian nodded, determination replacing grief in her eyes. It's time the Bennetts stood for truth instead of appearances. Where do we start? Over the following months, Bellwood Manor gradually transformed from a burned-out shell to a place of life and purpose. The Historical Society partnered with the newly established Bellwood Heritage Project to digitally archive all the documents found in the vault. Local craftsmen volunteered their skills to restore key rooms, preserving the historical architecture while creating functional spaces for exhibits and community gatherings. Most surprising was James Bennett's eventual, grudging cooperation. After a closed-door meeting with the foundation board, which included showing them selected documents from the vault, he returned with a proposal. The Bennett Foundation would fund half the restoration costs in exchange for being acknowledged as partners in the truth and reconciliation process. Catherine suspected his motives weren't entirely altruistic, but progress was progress. The nursery became the beginning room, dedicated to stories of new starts and second chances. School groups toured it regularly, learning about the Bennett family history, the full history, not just the sanitized version that had been taught for generations. The vault beneath the oak tree was transformed into the reckoning room, where primary documents told the unvarnished story of how wealth and power had been accumulated at others' expense. Catherine moved permanently into the caretaker's cottage on the property, which had survived the fire largely intact. Lily enrolled in the local school, forming an inseparable friendship with Max. Rachel spent weekends at Bellwood, gradually connecting with the house of her birth and the father she couldn't remember, but whose love she now carried with her. One evening, as autumn painted the Georgia landscape in gold and crimson, Catherine sat on the newly rebuilt porch of Bellwood Manor, watching the sunset. She no longer felt like an outsider or a woman running from her past. For the first time since losing her parents, since David's betrayal, she felt whole. "Penny for your thoughts," Rachel said, joining her with 2 glasses of sweet tea. "Just thinking about how places find the people they need," Catherine mused. "Or maybe people find the places that need them." Rachel smiled, gazing up at the mansion that had once been her birthplace. "Samuel would have loved what you've done here, not just preserving the house, but bringing the truth into the light." "We did it together," Catherine corrected. "All of us." The next morning, as Catherine was organizing materials for a new exhibit, Lily came running up the grand staircase, her face alight with excitement. "Mom, look what I found in the garden!" In her hands was Annabelle, the porcelain doll, cleaned, her dress mended, propped against the trunk of the oak tree as if waiting to be found. "But how?" Catherine began, remembering the torn scrap of fabric they'd found in the trash. "She came back because we fixed the house," Lily said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "She was just hiding until it was safe." Catherine smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. Perhaps there were some mysteries better left unexplained. 1 year later, as autumn painted the Georgia landscape in gold and crimson, Catherine sat in her new office in what had once been the library of Bellwood Manor. The restoration was nearly complete, and tours of the house had become so popular that she'd hired 2 part-time guides. A publisher in Atlanta had expressed interest in her book about Bellwood's history, and she was halfway through the manuscript. The door opened softly, and David from the antique shop peeked in. "Too busy for lunch?" he asked with a warm smile that had become familiar over the past few months. Catherine found herself smiling back. "Never too busy for good company," she replied, feeling the gentle flutter in her chest that had surprised her when they began spending time together. At 44, she hadn't expected to find romance again, but life at Bellwood seemed determined to defy expectations. Through the window, she could see Lily showing Max how to make leaf rubbings on the lawn. Her daughter had blossomed here, growing more confident and joyful with each passing month. The shadows of the divorce had faded from her eyes, replaced by the curiosity and wonder that Catherine had feared might be lost forever. "You know," David said as they walked through the gardens, "when you first came to town, folks thought you were crazy to take on Bellwood." Catherine laughed. "Sometimes the best decisions look like madness to everyone else." "And now?" he asked, his hand finding hers. "Now I know I didn't just find a house," she said, squeezing his fingers. "I found my way home." That afternoon, hundreds of people gathered on the restored grounds for the official opening of the Bellwood Heritage Center. Lanterns illuminated the paths, and the once charred facade now stood proud again, its windows glowing with warm light. Catherine stood on the front steps, no longer an outsider, but the voice of Bellwood itself. "I bought this house for $500, she began, soft laughter rippling through the crowd. "But what I found here was worth far more than money. I found a story that needed telling. I found a daughter searching for her name. I found a man who tried to bury his truth but left just enough behind for someone to find it. She paused, looking out at the faces illuminated by candlelight. Rachel, Lily, Martha, Helen, Vivian, and even James, standing stiffly at the edge of the crowd. This place was built with ashes and sorrow. Now it stands with memory and meaning. If you take anything from Bellwood, let it be this. No story is ever truly lost, not as long as someone is willing to listen. As twilight deepened into night and stars appeared above the restored mansion, Catherine knew she had found more than a house to renovate. She had found her purpose, her community, and in the most unexpected way, her home. The woman who had once walked through ashes to escape grief had become the guardian of 1,000 untold voices. And now the story she had uncovered belonged to everyone. Every person who thought it was too late to start again, every elder with a secret unspoken, every soul who feared their past was too heavy to carry. For Catherine, Rachel, and the entire town of Oakwood, the past wasn't something to run from anymore. It was the path that had led them home. Every house holds stories within its walls. Every person carries secrets in their heart. But only when we're brave enough to face our past can we truly move forward. Thank you for listening to this story. What secrets are waiting for your discovery?